What I am
This
going to
vital
show you
equipment box
today
keeps you
is
prepared.
not just
Now,
another
let's
secret
cast the
nozzle
line.
from a fishing store. This is an inexpensive additive, not a
Rely on
bite
proven
activator in a
methods.
bright bottle,
Focus.
and not an imported attractant
In
with
the
an
field, clear
unpronounceable
labeling is
name for which they will charge you 3 skins. You will buy this at the nearest grocery store for pennies in the breakfast department. And this remedy will do what no Japanese or American spray for 3,000 rubles is capable of. This substance creates an invisible but powerful trail that spreads for tens of meters against the current, leading the fish straight to your hook, as if you had drawn a glowing arrow for it on the bottom of the river. Fishermen on the Volga and Dnieper have used similar principles for decades. Old grandfathers on the Pripyat and the lower reaches of the Don knew this secret even before you were born. But the modern fishing industry does everything so that this knowledge does not reach the general masses. The reason is banal, and I will explain it later. Once you understand the business model of the market giants, you will never look at the shelf with branded stinkies with the same eyes again. In the meantime, remember one thing. The secret is not in the nozzle itself. The secret is in how the fish finds it. There is a material that turns an ordinary hook into a long-range transmitter of an olfactory signal. It is applied in 30 seconds and costs less than a box of matches. The name of this product, the scientific justification for its work, and why it beats any store-bought bait. We will talk about all of this right now. Our mission is to return to the ordinary fisherman the knowledge that belongs to him by right. Old methods, tested on the rivers of Siberia, the lakes of Kazakhstan, and the floodplains of the Kuban. What your grandfather knew, and what commercial fishermen practice. But what do glossy magazines keep quiet about? Because you can't make millions on this. If you want to catch more, spend less, and understand why some always leave with a full net, while others leave with nothing, listen carefully, because the story with ordinary peanut butter is much deeper than it seems at first glance. The secret is not in the taste of the peanuts themselves. The secret is in the cold fat, which slowly melts in the water. Let's figure it out. Have you ever noticed what happens when a drop of fat falls into cold water? It does not dissolve instantly like sugar. It breaks down into microscopic layers, creating a kind of oil mist that drifts with the current. This mist is the ideal carrier of scent. It carries aroma particles over vast distances, covering an area many times larger than any compressed portion of porridge or boilie. Peanut butter does exactly this. In a cold state, it has a thick, pasty consistency. When you apply a thin layer not to the tip, but to the bend of the hook, it sticks tightly to the metal. In the water, it begins to slowly warm up and release that very mist of vegetable fat with the aroma of roasted nuts. The fish does not see the hook. The fish feels the highway that leads to it. And this is not my fantasy. Remember history. In the post-war years on the Volga, when every hook was worth its weight in gold, and fishing was not a hobby, but a way of survival for entire villages, old men used lard or unrefined sunflower oil to rub weights and leashes. In Central Asia, when catching carp, crushed roasted peanuts or sesame seeds were added to the bait precisely for the sake of the oil trail. In Yakutia, taimen hunters greased their homemade lures with animal fat. The logic is identical everywhere. I myself saw in a remote village near Tver how a fisherman of about 70 rubbed the feeder with a piece of old lard before each cast. To my question, why? He answered simply, so that the water whispers to the fish where lunch is served. This old man knew more about the biochemistry of the reservoir than the authors of modern textbooks. In Japan, when catching wild carp, they traditionally use fermented soybean paste, which is rubbed along the line to create an olfactory trail along the entire trajectory of the tackle. Different cultures, different continents, but the conclusion is the same. A fish's sense of smell is the front door, and fat is the key. Now about the science that is being hidden from you. The olfactory system of a fish, whether it is our native catfish, bream, or perch, is fantastically designed. If a person has about 5 to 6 million olfactory receptors, then an adult catfish can have up to 180 million. They are distributed in the so-called olfactory rosettes in the fish's nostrils, which work like funnels to capture molecules. This means that the fish does not just smell, it engages in triangulation. It feels whether the concentration of molecules is increasing or falling, and literally navigates along the scent gradient to the source. Peanut butter fat consists of unsaturated fatty acids, which in cold water do not turn into a lump but delaminate into nanodroplets. Each such drop is a capsule with a signal. Now about the myths. The main myth that they sell us is that the bait should smell strong. Nonsense! The sharp chemical smell of alcohol attractants in cold water often works as a repellent, scaring away large, cautious fish. Nature does not know the smell of strawberries and cream in the concentration of an industrial chemical plant. But nature knows the smell of amino acids and vegetable fats very well. The grandfather's advice to pour kerosene into the bait, which is still alive in some regions, works on the same principle of molecule transfer. But fat is much more environmentally friendly and effective. The mistake of many is to think that a fish can be deceived by the tactic of more is better. No, a fish can only be lured by a natural physical process. When you use peanut butter, you are not feeding the fish. You are creating a coverage area. The area of signal distribution from an oil film is geometrically larger than from any solid object. This is pure mathematics. Before I move on to the step-by-step instructions for use on the reservoir, you must understand that what I am describing is only the tip of the iceberg. This knowledge of fat trails is part of a fundamental system of effective fishing that we have collected bit by bit in archives and on the banks of rivers. Real practice is not only what to hook, but also how to present it. Prepare your gear. Check the sharpness of the hooks. After all, in the next part, we will analyze a specific algorithm: how to store, how to smear, and why the hook bend is the critical point. Knowledge is passed from heart to heart, from generation to generation. We are beginning to break the marketing shackles. To be continued. The fishing industry today is a giant machine for processing your money into empty hopes wrapped in rustling plastic, with the logos of global brands. We have been taught to believe that without an echo sounder for 100,000, a graphite rod costing a salary, and suitcases of secret attractants from a laboratory in London or Osaka, there is nothing to do on the shore. But let's stop for a second and look into a real historical archive that will not be shown in commercials. Let's move to the 40s on the banks of the Volga, Oka, or Dnieper. In those days, fishing was not a hobby and not a way to take a break from your wife, but a harsh question of survival. In villages and cities ravaged by war and post-war hunger, fish was the only available source of high-quality protein. Those fishermen had neither smart feeders nor fluorocarbon, and certainly no synthetic appetite stimulants. But they had an understanding of nature, honed to the sharpness of a razor. My grandfather told me how, in the lower reaches of the Don, they caught huge carp using ordinary cake, flavored with a drop of unrefined oil that smelled all over the neighborhood. But the most valuable secret was always fat. In Siberia, on harsh rivers like the Yenisei or Lena, commercial fishermen knew that to lure a predator out of the snags in icy water, you need to give it a signal that will not freeze and will not dissolve without a trace. They used rendered internal lard or bone marrow, which they literally rubbed into homemade lures and hooks. Why? Because in conditions of calorie deficiency, a fish, like a human, looks for the most energy-efficient fuel, and its receptors are tuned to search for lipids, fats. The peanut butter we are talking about today is a modern, affordable, and incredibly effective equivalent of those very grandfather's secrets that allowed feeding entire families in the darkest times. This is not just food. It is a chemical marker that screams to the fish. Energy is here. Life is here. Now let's move on to the hard science that the manufacturers of magic sprays are so afraid of. Why does your expensive alcohol or water-based attractant often work worse than a jar of cheap oil for a couple of dollars? The answer lies in biochemistry and the physics of water. Most store-bought stinkies are designed to smell impressive in the store. But as soon as they get into the water, especially our typical murky suspended water with variable oxygen content, their molecules behave unpredictably. They either instantly dissolve and are carried away by the current, leaving no trace, or are locked inside the nozzle due to the temperature difference. The sense of smell of a fish, say, an ordinary bream or crucian carp in the ponds of Kazakhstan or the lakes of Belarus, is a complex system of olfactory rosettes. These are not nostrils in the human sense. They are high-precision chemical analyzers. A fish is able to catch one molecule of a substance in millions of liters of water. But for it to follow the trail, this trail must be continuous and stable. Peanut fat, unlike alcohol, has a unique viscosity and hydrophobicity. Getting into the water, it begins the process of slow diffusion. It does not dissolve, it emulsifies. Each microscopic drop of fat becomes a vehicle for aromatic molecules. And here, geometry comes into play. An ordinary feeder with porridge gives a cloud of turbidity that quickly settles. The oil trail from peanut paste creates a cone of attraction that can stretch for 50, 70, or 100 meters downstream. This is effectively an invisible highway. The fish, falling into this cone, begins to move against the current, feeling how the concentration of fat molecules increases. For it, this is not just a smell, it is a physical sensation of the proximity of food. Let's debunk one of the most persistent myths. The fish sees the bait, so it must be bright. This is nonsense, especially at depths of more than 2 meters or at dusk. In most of our reservoirs, visibility is limited to 1.5 meters. A fish is a pathfinder that relies on the lateral line and sense of smell. Therefore, the color of your boilie matters only for your wallet and aesthetic pleasure. But the chemical trail is what really makes the fish open its mouth. Another misconception is the belief in universal aromas like strawberry or tutti frutti. Have you ever wondered where a carp in the Aral Sea or a carp in a Moscow region paid pond would get a genetic memory for the smell of tropical fruits? It doesn't exist, but it has a clear instinct for the smell of protein and fatty acids. Roasted peanuts are a concentrate of what nature calls high-calorie prey. This is a signal that is understandable to the fish at the DNA level. Now about the temperature regime. In our climate, where the water temperature in rivers jumps from icy to warm milk, the viscosity of fat plays a key role. If the water is too cold, ordinary attractants simply freeze and do not give off a smell. Peanut butter, thanks to its content of unsaturated fats, retains the ability to micro-release even at low temperatures. This makes it an ideal weapon for early spring or late autumn when the fish is passive and does not want to waste energy searching for small prey. It will only go for a powerful, stable signal. And here we come to a conflict of interest. Why isn't this written about in the fishing press? Because a jar of peanut butter costs 150 rubles and lasts for the whole season. It is impossible to build a business on this. It is much more profitable to sell you 5 different bottles for different types of bottom and different lighting. We are fed marketing fairy tales, while old men on the outskirts of cities continue to pull trophies on the simplest penny compositions. Remember, nature cannot be deceived by a bright label. It can only be understood. In the next part, we will move on to practical magic. I will show why you need to apply the oil exactly to the bend of the hook, and not to the tip. How to correctly combine this method with a live nozzle like a worm or maggot. And why 15 minutes is a critical interval that separates a successful fisherman from one who just puts down the gear. Knowledge is the only tackle that does not break or dull. We continue to reveal the truth that has been hidden from you for years. The fishing world will never be the same. Imagine that you are in an absolutely dark room where there is not a single ray of light, but you know exactly where a piece of freshly baked bread lies, because your hands have turned into thousands of ultra-sensitive antennas, catching the slightest movement of air molecules. This is exactly how an ordinary river catfish or bream sees the world in the murky waters of the Dnieper or Volga. For a fish, water is not just a habitat. It is a dense information broth in which smells and vibrations mean much more than sight. We are used to trusting our eyes, but fish trust their chemical detectors, which are thousands of times superior to any human technology. And here lies the main paradox of modern fishing. While you spend 1,000 rubles on bright lures and flavored silicone, old-school professionals use physics and organic chemistry for pennies. Remember the 70s, the era of deficit in the USSR, when fishing stores offered only bamboo rods and iron spoons instead of lures. It was then that the culture of using fat beacons was born in the closed fishing communities of the Baltics and Ukraine. Fishermen on the Caspian, hunting for large carp, noticed that the fish reacts not to the bait itself, but to the trail it leaves. They used cake soaked in thick hemp oil. But the real breakthrough was the appearance of the first imported products, including that very peanut paste that sailors brought from foreign trips. It was not a whim. It was a cold calculation. Peanut fat doesn't just smell, it has a unique buoyancy. Unlike heavy animal fats, which quickly freeze into a lump, peanut vegetable fats remain active even in the cool water of northern rivers. Science explains this simply. Unsaturated fatty acids have a so-called broken molecular structure, which does not allow them to pack tightly into a solid structure when the temperature drops. For a fisherman, this means one thing. Your signal will work where others give up. Look at the numbers that will make you think. An ordinary carp is able to recognize the smell of amino acids in a concentration of 1 part per billion. This is equivalent to 1 teaspoon of a substance dissolved in a giant Olympic swimming pool. Now imagine the power of a whole layer of peanut butter on your hook. It creates a zone of olfactory explosion around the tackle. When we talk about fishing myths, the most dangerous is the belief that fish need to be fed liters of expensive bait. In fact, an excess of food on the bottom is your main enemy. You are simply giving the fish a buffet where your hook is just one of hundreds of plates. The oil trail strategy works differently. You don't feed the fish. You drive it crazy with a smell that leads to the only edible object, your nozzle. It's as if you smelled a steak in an empty hallway. You will follow the smell and find its source without being distracted by crumbs on the floor. In regions with a strong current, such as the Amur or the lower reaches of the Yenisei, this method becomes the only alternative. The water there is constantly updated, washing away any water-soluble attractants in a matter of seconds. But the oil film of peanut butter sticks to the surface of stones, snags, and the line itself, creating a long-lasting trail. Old fishermen on Baikal called this a prayed-for place, although there was no magic here. Just a drop of fat that gave off an aroma for hours. Another myth that needs to be debunked is the belief in smart fish. Fish are not smart. They are instinctive. Their behavior is dictated by three factors: safety, reproduction, and energy. If you give it a signal of available energy in the form of vegetable fats, its brain turns off fear. Biological mechanisms of biting directly depend on metabolism. At a water temperature of 18 to 22 degrees, most cyprinid fish have a peak of food activity. It is in this range that peanut butter works as an ideal catalyst. But as soon as the temperature drops below 10, the tactics must change. And here, armchair experts usually fail, continuing to pour liters of sweet syrups, which in icy water lie on the bottom as dead weight, only scaring away the fish with their unnatural chemical background. Real practice requires an understanding that water is a solvent, and how your product dissolves determines your success. Peanut fat creates an emulsion, a suspension of microscopic droplets that do not sink or float, but hang in the water column, moving with the slightest movement of the liquid. This creates a volumetric attraction effect. If you are fishing in a current, position your gear so that the oil trail goes along the edge. That's where the big fish patrol. Remember, you're not just casting a fishing rod, you're designing a trap. Use a sliding weight so that the fish does not feel resistance when biting. But before casting, be sure to treat the weight itself with a thin layer of oil. This will turn your weight from a useless piece of lead into an additional source of attraction. Many ask, why can't you just use roasted seeds? The answer is in concentration and viscosity. Seeds quickly lose their aroma, and the paste holds it due to its homogenized structure. This is technological progress put at the service of folk ingenuity. The conflict between athletes with their expensive compositions and grandfathers with a jar of oil is a conflict of marketing and reality. An athlete needs to sell you a brand. A grandfather needs to bring home fish to fry for dinner. We choose the path of results. Look at your gear right now. They are ready to become part of this scientific system. In the next part, we will analyze a baker's dozen of mistakes that 90% of beginners make when trying to repeat this method, and talk about how adding ordinary garlic or a drop of tar can turn your bait into a weapon of mass destruction for specific types of fish, from the cunning chub to the powerful grass carp. Knowledge is your main tackle, and we have only just begun to reveal it. Get ready. It will be even more detailed further on. Now that you understand the physics of the process, it's time to move on to the most important part of our investigation, to the practical application that distinguishes a theorist from a person with a full net. You must realize one thing. When you apply this layer of fat to your hook, you are not just changing the smell of the bait. You are changing the geometry of the space around it. Most fishermen make a fatal mistake by trying to make peanut butter the main nozzle. This is a path to failure. Peanut paste is not food. It is a transport system. And how you use it determines whether your fishing trip will be a triumph or another reason to complain about bad pressure. Let's break down the step-by-step algorithm that I have derived over years of testing on rivers from the Dnieper to the Irtysh. The first and most critical step is temperature control. Have you ever wondered why grandfathers always kept their secret stinkies in the shade or in a cold cellar? Peanut fat is a capricious substance. If you leave the jar in the sun, it will turn into a liquid emulsion that will wash off the hook at the first hit on the water. Your oil must be cold. I always keep a small jar in a thermal bag next to ice packs, or in the shade under the bank. Only in a cooled state does the paste have that very plasticine viscosity that allows it to hold on the metal of the hook during a power cast. Remember, Your task is for the fat to start melting in the water and not in your hands. Second, the point of application. Forget about the tip. Forget about the shank. The only place where this method works 100% is the bend of the hook, its inner curve. Why? Because it is here that an aerodynamic shadow is created during flight and hydrodynamic protection during falling. When your rig flies into the water, the main pressure falls on the front of the bait. If you smear the tip, the oil will simply be blown away by the airflow or washed away when entering the water. On the bend, it remains anchored, starting its work only when the tackle has laid on the bottom. This is a subtle difference that separates the amateur from the master. Third, the 15-minute rule. This is what lazy fishermen break on. An oil trail is not a perpetual motion machine. As soon as the top layer has emulsified and gone with the current, the signal intensity drops. You must update the layer every 15 to 20 minutes, or after every second cast. You are not just catching fish at one point. You are constantly drawing a fresh map of scents in the water column. Now, let's dive into the specifics of our reservoirs. If you are hunting for catfish in the holes of the Don or Cuban, peanut butter becomes the base on which you layer the animal component. Catfish is a giant amino acid detector. Nut fat prepares its receptors, making them more sensitive to the main course, whether it's a bunch of night crawlers or a piece of liver. For Crucian carp and carp on the lakes of Kazakhstan or in the floodplains of the lower Volga, a combo works ideally. A thin layer of oil on the hook, plus a grain of garlic powder. This creates a double blow, an oil trail and a sulfurous irritant that makes the fish literally attack the nozzle. An important clarification regarding the business model I promised to tell you about. Have you ever wondered why professional series of baits are so expensive? There is no gold dust there. There are penny wastes of confectionery production and a shock dose of synthetic flavorings that work quickly, but not for long. It is profitable for the manufacturer that you pour 5 to 10 kilo of their mixture into the water in one fishing trip. Our method with peanut butter goes against this logic. You don't need to feed the fish with buckets. You need to direct it to the hook. And this is the main reason why official experts and fishing champions, whose caps are hung with sponsor logos, are silent about this technique. They are paid to make you buy packs, not a jar at the grocery store. But I'm not here to sell you advertising. My task is to give you the fisherman's code. Everything we are talking about, the principles of working with fat trails, the mechanics of olfactory triggers, the creation of prohibited mixtures at home, is only part of a huge layer of knowledge. We have collected 12 categories of forbidden knowledge, from the chemistry of homemade dips to the behavior profiles of fish such as catfish, carp, bream, zander, perch, and pike. There you will find ready-made recipes for each season and each type of reservoir. But back to practice. There is another secret that I call the Japanese trail. If you are fishing with a feeder or a classic bottom rod, try treating the last 20 to 30 centimeters of the line before the hook with oil. This will create a volumetric scent corridor right in the zone of your nozzle. The fish, walking along the bottom, literally stumbles upon this corridor and, following it, inevitably finds your hook. This is incredibly effective when catching bream in the reservoirs of Belarus and central Russia. Bream is a schooling and extremely suspicious fish. A loud splash of a heavy feeder can scare away a large individual, but an invisible oil trail never will. This is a natural soft signal that does not cause a sense of danger in the fish. Now for the scientific debunking of one of the most harmful tips. Add more sugar to the bait. In warm water, sugar can indeed work as a fast carbohydrate, but in 90% of cases, it simply attracts swarms of small roach or rudd, which instantly destroy your bait even before a serious trophy approaches. Peanut fat is a filter. It is of little interest to small fry, but it is a powerful magnet for large trophy fish whose metabolism requires high-quality lipids. You literally cut off the trash fish, focusing on the result. In concluding this part, I want to remind you, nature does not forgive fuss. Fishing is not a lottery. It is a chess game with an invisible opponent. Every step you take, replacing a leash, choosing a place, applying oil, must be conscious. We are not trying to deceive the fish. We are using its biological needs to our advantage. The old methods we talked about, from lard on the hooks of Siberian grandfathers to peanut paste today, are a single line of continuity. This is knowledge that was passed from mouth to mouth on the banks of the great rivers, and which we are obliged to preserve today. Ahead of us is the final, most powerful part of our investigation. We will talk about how to turn ordinary store-bought paste into a super attractant with the help of one secret ingredient from the pharmacy. We will analyze mistakes in choosing a fishing spot that negate any tricks. And I will give you a final parting word that will forever change your attitude towards the fishing counter. Know your river, understand your fish. And remember, practice is the only criterion of truth. See you in the next part. It's already on the way. We have reached the final point of our investigation. And if you are still here, it means you are ready to stop being just a consumer of fishing marketing and become a real hunter who understands the essence of the processes. Until this moment, you saw in a jar of peanut butter just a dessert or a snack. But from today, it is a high-tech olfactory tool that costs pennies and works for months. Now I will give you what we collected this puzzle for, bit by bit. 3 levels of optimization that will turn your peanut method into something bordering on prohibited techniques. Listen carefully, because these nuances are the difference between an accidental bite and a stable result that will make your neighbors on the shore smoke nervously. Optimization 1. The pharmacy detonator. Remember, I mentioned that fat is a transport. To make this transport supersonic, we need a catalyst. Old fishermen in the Moscow region and in Ukraine in the 80s used a secret that will not be written about in glossy magazines. Ordinary Corvalol and anise drops from the pharmacy. Add 1 drop of Corvalol to a portion of peanut paste before application. The menthol and valerian contained in it, in combination with the fat molecules of peanuts, create a thermal shock effect for the fish's receptors. This works like a flare in total darkness. Catfish and large crucian carp react to this combination instantly, as menthol enhances the diffusion of fats in cold water, making the trail spread even more aggressively. Optimization 2. The geometry of the current. Remember, once and for all, your gear is not a static object. It is a signal release point. If you are fishing on rivers like the Desna, Don, or Irtish, you must use the current as your delivery service. Never just throw into a hole. Look for an edge where the flow slows down. Apply oil to the bend of the hook and cast slightly upstream from the intended fish location. The oil mist will go in an arc, describing an ideal trajectory straight to the fish's nose. If you are fishing in the stagnant water of lakes in Belarus or Kazakhstan, after casting, make 2 or 3 slow turns of the reel. This will create an initial oil trail, a path along which the fish will find the source of the smell much faster than if the bait just lay motionless in the silt. Optimization 3. The species profile. For our native carp and common carp, pure paste without additives works best, as they are interested in the lipid profile. For bream in reservoirs, add a pinch of ground coriander directly to the oil layer on the hook. Bream is a great gourmet. and the combination of fat with a spicy aroma is irresistible for it. If your goal is a night catfish, then peanut butter should be mixed with mashed liver or blood. The fat will block the washing out of the blood, allowing the aroma to ooze for hours, attracting the giant from the deepest stronghold. Now let's answer the question that is probably spinning in your head. If it's so simple and effective, why isn't it on the store shelves? The answer is simple and cynical. It's a matter of industry survival. Imagine the board of directors of a large fishing concern. They spend millions of dollars on the development of secret formulas, on the production of complex packaging, on the fees of professional fishermen who in every video repeat, "Buy our new attractant for $25. And then you appear with a jar of oil for $1.50 that catches better. If this knowledge becomes mass, the market for elite baits will collapse. It is not profitable for them to sell you what is cheap and works for a long time. They need you to buy consumables that run out in 2 fishing trips. This is not a conspiracy theory, it is ordinary capitalist logic. But we play by different rules. We return fishing to its origins, to ingenuity, knowledge of biology, and respect for the traditions of our ancestors. Everything you learned today about olfactory rosettes, about the emulsification of fats in cold water, about the historical experience of grandfathers on the Volga and Mississippi, this is only the tip of the iceberg. We have gathered hundreds of such techniques, from creating homemade boilies, self-rollers from semolina and seeds, to smart baiting systems that make the fish stand at the point for days. These are categories of knowledge that the industry is trying to erase from your memory, replacing them with bright labels. This is an investment in your skill that will pay off on the very first serious fishing trip. And now the main advice that many will ignore, but you should not. Don't take my word for it. Go to the shore. Take your usual gear. Buy the simplest jar of creamy peanut butter without sugar and chocolate, and try it. Apply a thin layer to the bend, make a cast, and see what happens in 15 minutes. You will see bites where there was silence before. You will feel that very confidence that our grandfathers had when they went to the river not to try their luck, but to take what was theirs. The mistake of most beginners is that they expect a miracle from the gear. But the miracle is in understanding nature. Do not overdo it with the amount of oil. A thin film is better than a thick piece. Observe the update timing and, most importantly, watch the water. If you saw this video, you are no longer an ordinary fisherman. You are a researcher. Share this knowledge with a friend who still believes that the secret of success is in the price of his reel. Send him a link. Do a good deed. Write in the comments on which reservoir you are going to try this method and what fish you are waiting for. I read everything and often give specific advice on locations. Like this video, if this investigation opened your eyes. Algorithms should promote the truth, not advertising. If this story changed the way you look at the simple ingredients in your kitchen or the weeds in your garden, subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Plant the seeds of the future. The next treasure will be revealed soon.